The cavern lights went out. Ethan heard Rachel screaming through the phone, "Run!" Then the call disconnected. For 1 second, Ethan Cole stood completely still. The darkness around him was absolute. He couldn't see the cavern, he couldn't see the tunnel, and he couldn't see Mason. But he could hear him breathing, right beside him. Slow, calm, almost amused. "Now you know why Caleb trusted me." Ethan backed away. His hands searched the wall. "Mason?" The breathing stopped. Then Mason's voice came from somewhere else, farther down the tunnel. "Ethan." He turned. Another voice answered from behind him. "Don't listen to him." 2 Masons. Ethan raised his flashlight. Nothing happened. The battery was dead. Below him, hundreds of voices began whispering. "Ethan, Ethan, Ethan." Different voices, same rhythm. Then Caleb's voice rose above them. "Jump." Ethan froze. "What?" "Jump down." Another Caleb answered. "No, stay there." Then Rachel. "Come find me." Thomas. "Don't move." Mason. "Run." The voices overlapped. Within seconds, Ethan couldn't understand any of them. He covered his ears. Then someone grabbed his jacket. Ethan swung. His fist struck a face. A man fell. "Damn it!" Mason. Ethan crawled backward. "Stay away from me." "Quiet. You're one of them." "If I was one of them, you'd already be dead." "You lied to me." "So did your father." "Rachel said you never came back." Mason stopped. "Rachel's alive?" "She called me." "From where?" "The cabin." Mason laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because he was afraid. "There's no phone service down here." "I know." "Then how did she call?" Ethan didn't answer. Mason moved closer. Ethan raised the empty gun. "Don't!" "You have 3 bullets left." Ethan froze. "How do you know that?" "I watched you fire." "Or you remember me firing?" Mason stopped. Ethan could hear the smile in his voice. "Good." "What?" "Keep thinking like that." Something began climbing the cavern wall below them. Fingernails scratched against stone. Then another. Then dozens. Mason whispered, "We need to move." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Then stay here." Mason walked away. Ethan listened to his footsteps, then looked toward the cavern. The scratching grew louder. He followed. They moved through the tunnel without lights. Mason seemed to know where he was going. That made Ethan trust him even less. "Where are you taking me?" "Out." "You know another exit?" "Yes." "How?" Mason didn't answer. "Mason," "Because I've been here before." Ethan stopped. "When?" "The night Caleb disappeared." "You said you woke up beside the road." "I lied." "Why?" "Because your father made me." Ethan raised the gun. "Tell me what happened." "Not here." "Now." Mason turned. Ethan could barely see his outline. The thing wearing Caleb's face wasn't the first one that came out of these caves. Ethan waited. "Your father knew about them." "How long?" "Most of his life." "And he never told us?" "He thought he could keep you away." "Why me?" Mason said nothing. "Why me?" A voice whispered behind Ethan. "Because they wanted you first." "Caleb." Ethan turned. Someone stood in the tunnel. Thin, barefoot, chains hanging from his wrists. Caleb stepped closer. "Ethan." Mason raised the shotgun. Stop. Caleb smiled. You always point guns at people you can't identify? I can identify you. Can you? Caleb looked at Ethan. Ask me something. Ethan remained silent. Come on. Caleb stepped closer. Ask me how you broke Rachel's arm. Ethan's stomach tightened. Caleb continued. Ask me what Mom said before she died. Ask me where we buried the dog. Ask me what you said the last time we spoke. Mason whispered, Don't. Caleb looked at him. Why? Because you know the answers. Caleb smiled. Exactly. Ethan stared. Caleb's expression changed. For a moment, he looked genuinely hurt. That's the problem, isn't it? What? You came back wanting answers. Now answers can't help you. The scratching behind them grew louder. Mason grabbed Ethan. We move. Caleb shouted. If you follow him, Rachel dies. Ethan stopped. Mason pulled harder. Ethan. Caleb pointed toward a narrow tunnel. She is alive. You don't know that. I can take you to her. Mason aimed the shotgun. Caleb looked at Ethan. You left me once. The words hit harder than Ethan expected. Their last argument, the unanswered calls, the memorial Ethan had missed. You're not Caleb. Caleb's eyes filled with tears. That's what Dad said. Ethan hesitated. Mason fired. Caleb fell. Ethan shoved Mason against the wall. What the hell are you doing? Saving your life. You don't know that. No. Mason stared at him. I don't. Ethan looked toward Caleb. The body was gone. Only the chains remained. Mason picked them up. We're running out of time. Time for what? Mason looked toward the darkness. For them to decide which one of us leaves. They continued. Eventually, they reached an old steel door. Mason pushed it open. Inside was a room, not a cave, a room. Concrete walls, metal shelves, old photographs, tape recorders, boxes filled with notebooks. Ethan stared. What is this? Your father's. Thomas Cole had been studying the creatures for decades. Ethan opened a notebook. Every page contained names, dates, descriptions. Behavior after return, voice accuracy, memory accuracy, physical errors. Ethan found Caleb's name, Caleb Cole. First return, 11 months ago. Duration inside home, 6 days. Memory accuracy, nearly complete. Emotional accuracy, inconsistent. Physical errors, none observed. Final status, destroyed. Ethan stared. My father killed him. Mason stood behind him. He killed something. You helped. Yes. How? Mason didn't answer. Ethan grabbed another notebook. Mason read. First exposure, 11 months ago. Ethan looked up. What does exposure mean? Mason remained silent. Ethan kept reading. Returned from Black Pine Trail at 4:12 a.m. Claims 3 hours of missing time. Memory gaps observed. No physical errors. Voice accurate. Behavior uncertain. Final status unknown. Ethan closed the notebook. My father didn't know if you were human. No. Do you? Mason looked at him. No. The answer surprised Ethan. You don't know? I remember going into the forest. I remember Caleb hitting me. I remember waking up underground. Ethan stared. You told me you woke beside the road. I lied. Again? Yes. What happened underground? Mason looked toward the steel door. I heard myself screaming. Ethan said nothing. I followed the sound. I found a man who looked like me. He was tied to the wall. He knew my name. He knew my childhood. He knew Caleb. He knew everything. What did you do? I ran. And then? I woke up beside the road. Ethan felt cold. So either you escaped, or he did. Ethan looked at Mason. And you've lived with my family for 11 months. Yes. Why? Mason's expression hardened. Because if I am one of them, I wanted to know. Know what? Whether pretending to care eventually becomes the same thing as caring. Ethan said nothing. Mason looked away. I watched your father stop eating. I watched Rachel cry when she thought nobody could hear. I fixed the roof because Caleb promised he'd do it. I stayed because someone had to. His voice broke. And every morning I woke up wondering whether those thoughts were mine. For the first time, Ethan didn't see Mason as suspicious. He saw someone terrified of himself. Then they heard knocking, 3 times, from inside the wall. Mason raised the shotgun. Another 3 knocks. Thomas's voice. Ethan. Ethan approached. Mason grabbed him. Don't. Dad? Ethan, listen. The voice sounded weak. Rachel is alive. Ethan closed his eyes. Where? The old fire tower. Mason shook his head. It's lying. Thomas continued. They took her there. How do I know you're my father? Silence. Then Thomas laughed. You don't. Ethan opened his eyes. The voice continued. That's what I should have taught you. What? Stop asking questions they can answer. Ethan looked at Mason. Thomas whispered, trust the things they can't understand. The knocking stopped. A gunshot came from somewhere above them. Then Rachel screamed. Ethan ran. Mason followed. They found a mine shaft leading upward. At the top, moonlight. They climbed. The shaft opened half a mile from the fire tower. Ethan's phone had signal again. He called Rachel. No answer. They ran. The fire tower stood above the trees. A light burned inside. Ethan climbed first. At the top, Rachel was tied to a chair. Blood covered her forehead. Ethan rushed toward her. Mason stopped him. Wait. Rachel opened her eyes. Ethan, are you hurt? I don't know. Who brought you here? Dad. Mason looked at Ethan. Rachel continued. Something that looked like Dad. Ethan approached slowly. Tell me something they don't know. Rachel started crying. I can't. Rachel, they know everything. Try. She looked at him. When Mom died, you didn't cry. Ethan froze. Mason watched. Rachel continued. You went outside. You sat behind the hospital. Caleb found you. You told him you wished it had been Dad instead. Ethan lowered the gun. Only 3 people knew that. Ethan, Caleb, and Rachel. Then he remembered. The creatures had Caleb. They could know. Ethan raised the gun again. Rachel laughed bitterly. You see? What? It doesn't matter what I say. Ethan stared. You'll never know. Mason stepped closer. She's right. Rachel looked at him. You. Mason froze. You left me. What? At the cabin. Mason looked at Ethan. I never went back to the cabin. Rachel began crying. You were there. When? After Dad took me. Mason shook his head. No. You untied me. You told me Ethan was dead. You walked me into the forest. Mason stepped backward. Ethan raised the gun. Where were you? With you. Before the cave. Mason didn't answer. Mason. I don't remember. Rachel whispered. Because it wasn't him. Mason looked at her. How do you know? Rachel stared. Because it smiled when I stabbed it. Silence. She pointed toward the corner. A bloody hunting knife lay on the floor. Mason lifted his shirt. No wound. Ethan looked between them. So there are two Masons. Rachel shook her head. Maybe. What does that mean? Maybe there are more. Something slammed into the floor below. The tower shook. A voice called from outside. Ethan! Thomas. They looked down. Thomas stood at the bottom. Get away from Rachel! Rachel screamed. That's not Dad! Thomas raised his rifle. Mason is one of them, Mason whispered. He might be right. Ethan looked at him. What? I told you. I don't know what I am. Thomas began climbing. Ethan aimed down. Stop! Thomas continued. Son, stop! Thomas reached the top. Ethan fired into the wall beside him. Thomas froze. Ask me something. Ethan shook his head. No more questions. Thomas smiled. Good. Ethan stared. Why is that good? Because you're finally learning. Thomas stepped onto the platform. Rachel moved behind Ethan. Mason aimed at Thomas. 4 people. Ethan trusted none of them. Then Thomas did something strange. He placed the rifle on the floor. He looked at Mason. I'm sorry. Mason frowned. For what? For what I did to Caleb. Ethan stared. Thomas continued. The thing in Caleb's bed was alive. Mason looked at him. You said it was dead. I lied. What did you do? I took it back. To the caves? Thomas nodded. Why? Because it asked me to. Ethan felt cold. You listened to it? It sounded like my son. It knew it wasn't Caleb. It begged me not to kill it. Thomas began crying. It said it was afraid. No one spoke. I realized something that night. What? Thomas looked at Ethan. They aren't all the same. Mason lowered the shotgun slightly. Some hunt us. Some replace us. Some don't know what they are. Thomas looked at Mason. And some become better people than the ones they copied. Mason's face changed. Thomas stepped closer. I don't know which Mason came out of that cave. But I know which one stayed with my family. Ethan looked at Mason. Mason's eyes filled with tears. Then a rifle fired. Thomas jerked backward. Blood spread across his chest. Rachel screamed. Another Thomas stood on the stairs, holding a rifle. Get away from it! The wounded Thomas collapsed. Ethan turned toward the second Thomas. 2 fathers. The man on the stairs shouted, I've been tracking that thing all night! The wounded Thomas gasped. Ethan! The second Thomas raised the rifle. Move. Ethan stood between them. Which one is my father? Both answered. I am, Mason whispered. Ethan. What? The things they can't understand. Ethan remembered Thomas's words. Trust the things they can't understand. Facts didn't work. Memories didn't work. Pain? They could imitate pain. Love? Maybe. Ethan looked at the wounded Thomas. Dad? Yes? If you could bring Caleb back, but I had to die, would you do it? The wounded Thomas stared. The second Thomas shouted, Don't listen to him! Answer. The wounded Thomas began crying. No. Ethan waited. I loved Caleb. His voice broke. But he's gone. And I won't lose another son trying to undo what I already lost. Ethan looked toward the second Thomas. Your turn. The second Thomas smiled. I'd save Caleb. Ethan raised the gun. The smile disappeared. Wrong answer. Ethan fired. The second Thomas fell backward. Silence. Rachel began crying. Ethan dropped the gun. Then the body on the stairs moved. Its face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. The smile widened. The eyes became empty. Then it ran. Mason fired. The thing fell from the tower. It disappeared into the forest. Ethan rushed to Thomas. His father was dying. Dad. Thomas looked at him. You came home. Ethan held his hand. I'm sorry. For what? Caleb. Thomas shook his head. You didn't kill your brother. I left him. So did I. Thomas looked toward Mason. Mason. He approached. Thomas reached into his pocket. A key. The lower chamber. Mason stared. You found it? Thomas nodded. That's where they keep the first voices. Ethan frowned. The first voices? Thomas looked at him. They don't copy faces first. They copy voices. Every person they've taken. The original voice is kept below Black Pine Ridge, Rachel whispered. Caleb? Thomas nodded. If any part of your brother is still alive, it's there. Ethan held his father tighter. We can get you help. Thomas smiled. No. Dad, don't waste time lying to me. His breathing slowed. He looked at Ethan. I never blamed you. Ethan started crying. I know. Thomas smiled. No, you didn't. Then Thomas Cole died, holding his son's hand. For several minutes, no one spoke. Then Mason said, We finished this. Ethan looked at him. How? We go back. Rachel shook her head. No. Mason looked at her. If we don't, they'll keep coming. Ethan picked up the key. They returned to Black Pine Ridge before sunrise. The forest was silent. Too silent. They entered the caves. No voices, no copies, only darkness. The key opened a door beneath Thomas's hidden room. A staircase descended. At the bottom was a chamber filled with glass containers. Hundreds. Inside each was something dark, moving, whispering, voices. Ethan heard names, crying, begging, laughing. Then Caleb. Ethan. Ethan approached. A container near the back shook. Caleb? Don't let me out. Ethan stopped. What? Listen to me. Caleb's voice, weak, terrified. The thing that came home Wasn't me. I know. No. You don't understand. Mason and Rachel approached. Caleb continued. They don't replace us. They divide us. Ethan frowned. What? They take memories, fear, love, anger, everything. They separate it, and they build people from the pieces. Mason looked toward the containers. So the copies are parts of us. Caleb began crying. The one Dad killed, it loved him. The one in the cave, it hated Ethan. The ones hunting you, they're afraid. Ethan stared. Afraid of what? All the containers became silent. Then Caleb whispered, Me. The glass shattered. Every container broke. Darkness filled the chamber. Mason grabbed Ethan. Run! They climbed. Behind them, voices screamed. Hundreds. The cave shook. They reached the main chamber. Copies surrounded them. Caleb's, Rachel's, Thomas's, Mason's, Ethan's, hundreds. Then the real Caleb stepped forward. Older, thin, scarred, alive. Ethan stared. Caleb? Caleb smiled. You finally came home. Ethan didn't move. How do I know? Caleb looked at him. You don't. Then he hugged him. Ethan remained stiff. Caleb whispered, You left me. Ethan closed his eyes. I know. I hated you. I know. I waited for you. Ethan started crying. I know. Caleb pulled away. But I never wanted you to come back. The copies moved closer. Caleb looked at Mason. You know what you are. Mason said nothing. You've always known. Ethan turned. Mason? Mason looked at him. The night Caleb disappeared, I found him. Caleb stared. Mason continued. He was dying. The cave had already taken pieces of him. I tried to carry him out. But something followed us. Ethan waited. It killed me. Rachel covered her mouth. Mason continued. The Mason you knew died 11 months ago. Ethan stared. And you? Mason looked at his hands. I woke up with his memories. His guilt. His loyalty. Everything. Why did you lie? Because I wanted to be him. Ethan raised the gun. Mason didn't move. I stayed with your family. I helped your father. I protected Rachel. I looked for Caleb. His voice broke. If that doesn't make me Mason, then I don't know what does. Ethan lowered the gun. Caleb whispered, They're coming. The copies began moving. Mason looked toward the tunnel. There is one way to stop them. Caleb nodded. Destroy the chamber. Rachel stared. With us inside? Silence. Ethan understood. No. Caleb looked at him. They'll follow the voices. Someone has to stay. I'll do it. No! Ethan. I left you once. Caleb smiled sadly. And that's why it has to be me. Mason stepped forward. No. Everyone looked at him. Mason took the explosives from Thomas's emergency pack. You're human. Caleb stared. Maybe. Rachel is human. Ethan is human. Mason looked toward the copies. I've spent 11 months wondering what I am. He smiled. Maybe I finally get to choose. Ethan grabbed him. You don't have to prove anything. I know. Mason looked at him. That's why this matters. The copies rushed forward. Mason pushed them toward the tunnel. Go! Ethan, Rachel, and Caleb ran. Behind them, Mason fired. Once. Twice. Then his voice echoed. City boy! Ethan turned. Mason stood surrounded, smiling. Someone has to keep your family alive. Ethan cried. Mason! Mason pressed the detonator. The mountain shook. The tunnel collapsed. Ethan woke outside. Morning. Rachel lay beside him. Caleb nearby. Black Pine Ridge burned behind them. No voices, no copies, only silence. They returned to Red Hollow. Thomas was buried beside Ethan's mother. A grave was placed for Mason. There was no body. Caleb stood beside it. What do we write? Ethan looked at the stone. Mason Reed, beloved friend. Ethan shook his head. Family. Months passed. Caleb moved in with Ethan. Rachel left Red Hollow. They spoke every week. Slowly, life became normal. Almost. Ethan still woke at night when he heard noises outside. He never answered unknown phone calls, and he never trusted voices coming from another room until he saw the person speaking. 6 months later, Ethan sat in his apartment. Caleb was cooking dinner. Someone knocked. Ethan checked the door. Rachel. He smiled. She hadn't told him she was visiting. He opened the door. Rachel hugged him. You look terrible. You drove 6 hours to insult me? 9. They laughed. For the first time in months, Ethan felt safe. Caleb entered the room. He saw Rachel. His smile disappeared. What? Caleb stared. Ethan. Rachel looked confused. What? Caleb backed away. Get away from her. Ethan froze. Rachel laughed. Very funny. Caleb shook his head. Ethan. What is it? Caleb pointed at Rachel. The night we escaped the mountain. Rachel's smile faded. Rachel didn't come out with us. Silence. Ethan stared at him. What? Caleb began shaking. I didn't tell you. Why? Because you were already broken. Rachel stepped backward. Ethan, he's lying. Caleb continued. I saw her fall. The tunnel collapsed. She was still inside. Ethan looked at Rachel. She began crying. Don't listen to him. Ethan's phone rang. He looked down. Rachel. The woman standing in front of him stopped crying. Ethan answered. Hello? Rachel's voice came through the phone, terrified, whispering. Ethan? He stared at the woman in his apartment. Rachel? Where are you? At home. The voice on the phone began crying. No. What? I'm still in Red Hollow. Ethan couldn't breathe. The woman standing across from him smiled. The voice on the phone whispered. Ethan. What? I found Mason. Ethan looked at Caleb. The woman by the door slowly tilted her head. Rachel continued. He's alive. Ethan whispered. Where? There was silence. Then Rachel said, That's the problem. What problem? I found him outside the caves. Ethan waited. He doesn't remember me. The woman in the apartment took one step closer. Rachel whispered. And Ethan? What? I don't think the things in the mountain died. The lights went out. Ethan heard Caleb scream. Something moved through the room. His phone fell. In the darkness, Rachel's voice continued through the speaker. Whatever came back with you? The woman beside Ethan whispered the final words at the exact same time. Knows everything now. Then someone knocked on the apartment door. 3 times. Ethan stared into the darkness. A familiar voice spoke from the hallway. His father's voice. Son? Ethan stopped breathing. The doorknob slowly turned. End of part 2.